Today I want to do a quick cover, kind of like a glossary. Glossary example, definitions for abrasives that I use to do some of the work that I do. When it comes to grinding metal or grinding aluminum specifically, various artists use different tools, but a lot of times it comes down to just using it. It all comes down to the abrasives that you apply to the metal in order to get what some people call holographic grind marks. So I'm just going to cover a couple of the ones that I use and a little bit about what I've learned about them. One, you'll notice that there are some similar colors on these items. The color rating, or the color oftentimes is basically kind of used to indicate an overall grit level. As an example, this pearl abrasive conditioning disc is listed as fine. This here is in the coarser area, it's an 80 grit, and therefore is a coarser level. But obviously you might find that the blue Roloc style disc, and it is a slightly different color, is probably not as smooth, or is smoother than the 80 grit flap disc. So I'll trying to start with the lowest grit and go on. So what is a flap disc? Flap disc is made for 4.5 inch grinder. It's got a series of thin layers of basically sandpaper that are all glued together, and then it's an 80 grit. This one is an 80 grit, there's 40, there's 60, and there may be some higher grits, but this particular one is an 80. This one is by DeWalt, and they, again, are made for a 4.5 inch grinder. They have a max RPM of 13,300. Most of the 4.5 inch grinders are going to be 11,000 RPM. So the roughness of the 80 grit is similar here, or is used here. And I'll see if I can get this closer to the camera. Hopefully it'll focus properly. You should be able to see that there's some, it's a very rough grind. There's lots of lines going along here that are very, they're coarse, just like the 80 grit sandpaper would be. So it has its use. It gives a certain effect that some people enjoy, kind of a feathering in some ways, depending on how you use it. And then, of course, there are different grits there. I have used hook and loop style discs on an orbital sander. The reason I do that is I'll get to in the future, but they can be used on some tools as well for different applications. Again, depending on the grit, you'll get a smoother grind on the metal. For conditioning pieces, similar to what I have done with this particular one, this has been through a couple different things, but you can kind of see, hopefully, the marks that all go this way. They're very, very fine that go this direction. Basically, again, for conditioning, I took a 4.5 inch attachment, cut out a disc of this Maroon Scotchbrite, and then would physically by hand push it this way again, condition it. The idea is to kind of get an even surface to start with, kind of like a blank canvas. Another method I've used to do the same thing is this sponge block. They come in different grits. This is a fine. Some are coarser than that. There's different. Those are usually used for either wood. They are spongy. It's nice for that. And again, some of this, like this particular piece here, this piece here, some of it's about, if you were to take, just your normal hands and you're pressing and going like this, well, you're going to get pressure points where your fingers are. So the idea is that with this, the idea is that if you're doing it by hand, you get a more even pressure for a more even finish. Moving on, we have a drill attachment. There are several drill attachments. Some are wire brushes. This is like nylon or some form of plastic, and it's not as sharp on the ends. This can get a pattern. It's going to have a rougher pattern like this because, again, depending on what kind of drill you have, you can actually have one that has a little bit more control over the speed, which will allow you to do slower grinds. If you want an effect like this, but want to have a little bit more control over it, you can change the variation of speed with this particular item to do that, or even do an edge on to get kind of straight. These little things here are very spongy, they're very soft. Again, maroon coated or blue or beige, related to their coarseness. I use this in a particular thing in a Dremel. It's a very small, it leaves a very small path, but also a very soft path. Not as harsh on the grind, simply because of the way it's made. It's not going to have these really harsh marks. This is a Roloc disc, 2-inch. The abrasive, again, in maroon. Depending on the RPM, you're going to get a smoother or a coarser grind, and it is a harder material, so it's going to lean more towards the coarse grind, but not quite as bad as the 80 grit flap disc. These particular ones are, as an example of a hook and loop. This is a 400 grit 3-inch that I happen to use on a Milwaukee M12 polisher and sander. So the advantages, this particular one is again maroon, but it's a pearl conditioning disc, fine, for the 4.5-inch grinder. That's one of the ones that you can tell I've really used this one a lot, and it is used for, because the grinder is going so fast, it will leave a thin but very smooth mark on the aluminum. You won't see as much of the feathering or the arcing like you do with other ones. That's about it for the actual just materials that I use. Not that they go on the tools, but just what they do and how they work. This particular large piece here was done with the M12 using a 3-inch disc of the Maroon Scotchbrite, and you can see it's still got some marks, but it's a lot softer than the other one. I'm going to finish up a little bit. I'm going to try and get another video out ready today, and I'll post it next week, regarding the tools. Not so much how to use them, but which tools are used and why you might want to use different ones, which ones are out there and available. There are some that I don't have, but I'll try and cover them. These are just the basics on the abrasives. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and feel free to hit the notification bell if you want to be notified of when other videos are posted. Have a great day.